Magda Goebbels was born on November 11, 1901, in Berlin, Germany, as Joanna Maria Magdalena Magda Baron Rietschel. Her father was a successful businessman, and her mother was a socialite. Magda had a privileged upbringing and was exposed to the high society of Berlin at an early age. At the age of 17, Magda married a wealthy industrialist named Günter Goebbels, with whom she had one son, Harold. However, Magda was unhappy in her marriage and began an affair with Joseph Goebbels, a rising star in the Nazi Party. In 1931, Magda divorced Goebbels and married Goebbels. The couple had 6 children together, but their relationship was tumultuous, with Goebbels frequently cheating on Magda and engaging in affairs with other women. As the wife of the Nazi Party's propaganda minister, Magda was a prominent figure in the regime's inner circle. She was a close confidant of Adolf Hitler and played an active role in promoting the Nazi Party's anti-Semitic ideology. In April 1945, as Allied forces closed in on Berlin, Hitler and his inner circle retreated to the Fuhrer Bunker, an underground bunker complex beneath the city. Magda and Goebbels joined them there, along with their children. As the situation in Berlin became increasingly desperate, Goebbels became convinced that the Nazi cause was doomed and that the only way to maintain the purity of the Aryan race was through suicide. On April 30, 1945, Hitler committed suicide in the bunker, and the next day, Goebbels and Magda decided to follow suit. On the evening of May 1, 1945, Magda and Goebbels drugged their 6 children with morphine and then had them killed by a doctor, who administered cyanide to each child. After the children were dead, Magda and Goebbels went up to the bunker's garden, where they took their own lives. Magda Goebbels' actions in the final days of the war have been widely condemned, with many seeing them as a cruel and senseless act of violence against innocent children. Nevertheless, she remains a significant figure in the history of the Nazi Party, and her role in the regime's propaganda machine has made her a subject of fascination for many historians and scholars. Magda Goebbels was not only a prominent figure in the Nazi regime but also a strong supporter of the final solution, the Nazi plan to exterminate European Jews. In her diary, which was discovered after the war, she wrote about her excitement at the prospect of the deportation of Jews to the concentration camps and her hope that they would all be killed. Magda was also known for her impeccable sense of style and fashion. She was a regular patron of the top fashion houses in Paris and Berlin, and her elegant dresses and hairstyles were emulated by women across Germany. Despite her prominent role in the Nazi regime, there are indications that Magda may have had second thoughts about the ideology she had helped to promote. In her diary, she wrote about her fear that her children would be killed in the war and expressed doubts about the wisdom of the Nazi leadership. However, she ultimately chose to follow her husband to the bitter end and take her own life rather than face defeat and capture by the Allies. Magda's legacy remains controversial to this day. While some view her as a victim of circumstance who was caught up in the political currents of the time, others see her as a willing accomplice to one of the most heinous crimes in history. Regardless of one's perspective, Magda's life and actions serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideology and the consequences of blind loyalty to a political cause. After Magda and Joseph Goebbels committed suicide, their bodies were doused in gasoline and set on fire by Nazi soldiers to prevent them from being captured by the advancing Soviet forces. The remains of the Goebbels couple were discovered by Soviet soldiers on May 2, 1945. The bodies of their children were also found in the bunker's garden, where they had been killed. The eldest, Helga, was 12 years old, followed by Hildegard, 11, Helmut, 9, Holding, 8, Hedwig, 6, and Heidrun, 4. The news of the Goebbels children's deaths sent shockwaves through Germany and around the world. The senseless killing of innocent children was seen as a tragic reflection of the horrors of the war and the brutality of the Nazi regime. After the war, Magda Goebbels became a symbol of the dark side of the Nazi regime and a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideology and extremism. Her story has been the subject of numerous books, films, and documentaries, and her diary, which was discovered after the war, has been studied by historians and scholars seeking to understand the inner workings of the Nazi regime and the minds of its key figures. In the decades since her death, Magda Goebbels has become a controversial figure, with some seeing her as a victim of circumstance who was caught up in the political currents of the time, while others view her as a willing accomplice to the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. Regardless of one's perspective, her life and actions serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of extremism and the need to guard against the rise of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Magda Goebbels' story has also raised questions about the role of women in the Nazi regime. While the Nazi Party was notoriously misogynistic and viewed women primarily as wives and mothers, a number of women rose to positions of power and influence within the regime, including Magda Goebbels. Magda was a close confidant of Adolf Hitler and played an active role in promoting the Nazi Party's anti-Semitic ideology. She was also a prominent figure in the regime's propaganda machine, using her status as the wife of the propaganda minister to promote Nazi propaganda and maintain the regime's grip on power. Despite her prominent role in the regime, Magda's story highlights the limitations placed on women within the Nazi hierarchy. Despite her intelligence and influence, she was ultimately unable to sway the course of the war or prevent the collapse of the regime. Magda Goebbels' life and actions continue to be studied and debated by scholars and historians seeking to understand the complex factors that led to the rise of the Nazi Party and the atrocities committed by the regime. Her story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of extremism and the importance of vigilance in the face of authoritarianism and totalitarianism.